Memory match. One field, two nets, countless hours spent for this moment. 90 minutes each played to the second. Like mutts fighting, each man will play to full strength. Dirty socks, flashy cleats, footwork learned through a lifetime. One shining player seen as the team, then working together like dogs herding sheep. Goalie jerseys, gloves and cleats. It's now the final time, a slip and drag, nail-biting fans on the edge of their seats like a jack-in-the-box. 5 players approach, all in line waiting, standing, waiting, cheering, crying. One last man. Sweat drips down his temples. His beat-up cleats press down on the ground, making an indent. Fans all in awe, like seeing a cow flying, staring at the man. He has the pressure of an ox approaching the line. 1 ball, 1 net, 5 steps, 2 players, 1 kick, 1 tear, 1 game, 1 cheer. Hello, and welcome to Reading Poetry with Mr. Brendan. I am filming this in my classroom in Brooklyn at an international high school, and it's very strange for me to be doing this because as a teacher and as a writer, and I like to be able to talk to people and get their ideas. So I want to apologize right at the outset for if I say anything that people already know. Because normally I would start by just asking, what are people's experiences with reading poetry? So I'm gonna give you a minute to turn to the person next to you and talk about why you're here watching this video in this session. You can actually turn and talk. I'm gonna be quiet for a minute. Okay, those sounded like really fruitful discussions. I'm glad. All right, so what we're talking about is the importance of getting high schoolers to hear poetry, to see poetry, and to perform poetry. So in my experience, and again, I'm sure a lot of people have their own different experiences, high schoolers are very excited to hear their words. I was doing a poetry unit one time and they had to write these poems on Brooklyn, and this one kid wrote a poem that I think he was not taking too seriously. You know, it was just kind of same thing over and over, and he just kind of banged it out, and we were having people come up and read. He didn't want to read, and I said, oh, can I read your poem? So I took it up, and it was all just sentences about Brooklyn. You know, I live in Brooklyn, I sleep in Brooklyn, I eat in Brooklyn, blah, blah, blah. But I took it and I read it very seriously. You know, I stood and I said, I live in Brooklyn, I sleep in Brooklyn, I eat in Brooklyn, I am in Brooklyn, my life is in Brooklyn, but I like Manhattan, which was the last line. And just by building that crescendo and showing them that any words could take on some sort of feeling, I think that changed things a little bit for them. A student actually came up to me later and said, I really like the way you read that Brooklyn poem, even though it wasn't much. But I think part of the key to that was that it wasn't me. Because I've read my poems to them and I've shown them a video of my stuff when I was trying to give them some inspiration. I'm in the middle of a poetry performance unit with one of my classes, and I showed them this is what it can look like, and I've showed them a lot of spoken word poetry videos, but nothing is quite as exciting to them as hearing their words. And from there, getting them to come up and hearing their words in their voice, I think is also exciting. Now, once again, I might be reinventing the wheel inside of a wheel shop. Metaphors on the fly, very difficult. So essentially, it comes down to 2 things. And you can disagree with me, you can add more, but a lot of people talk about the difference between page and stage. So again, turn to your partner or a new person or 3 people or whatever and talk about the differences between read poetry, performed poetry, and maybe even just heard poetry. I don't know what the word would be for that. But talk for a minute about the different types of poetry that you've seen. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is offer one possibility for the classroom, which is alternate readings. So this poem that I read at the beginning, Memory Match, was written by a freshman in high school who, if she's there right now, I'm sure she's totally embarrassed that I'm reading it, but you know who you are. And I'm sure she's gotten a lot better at poetry. In fact, I know she has. But it doesn't matter if this is the best poem, a poem that needs a little work. You know, I think there's a lot in here. And to show kids that there are different ways to do it, I'm just going to give you an example by reading the first few lines a few different ways. So, Memory Match. One field, two nets, countless hours spent for this moment, 90 minutes, each played to the second. Memory match. One field, two nets, countless hours spent for this moment. 90 minutes each played to the second. Memory match. One field, two nets, countless hours spent for this moment. 90 minutes each played to the second. Memory match? One field, two nets, countless hours spent for this moment, 90 minutes, each played for the second. And let's do one more. Memory match. One field, two nets, countless hours spent for this moment, 90 minutes, each played to the second. So we're going to do one more little turn and talk, which you can talk about what I just did, the differences between them, or you could talk about how would you like to use voice, your voice, with student words in the class, or do you wish you had had more exposure to this when you were in school, and how would that change your idea of poetry? So, for those of you, great discussions, everyone. Love the ideas. For those of you in the Manchester area, every Thursday, at Stark Brewing Company, it's been a while since I've been there, Slam Free or Die happens. So if you or your students want to go and see poetry, want to hear poetry, want to perform poetry, it's a super supportive, super great open mic and slam series. It's really where I learned how to read poetry, and it will always have a special place in my heart and the hearts of many New Hampshire poets, so I highly recommend it, and they're very welcoming to students of all ages and people of all ages. I'm sure there's someone around here who can give you more details. They are on Facebook, they have an email address, they're on Twitter, so look into Slam Free or Die. We are going to close with one more poem, also by a high school poet, that I have made a couple of choices in my reading, and I want you to think about if you agree with them or how you would read it differently. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, and have a great Writer's Day. Brave. How is it that who we are, the people we believe to be our own, so blindly judge those so similar? We are afraid of things we do not understand. We stop and watch with such ignorance as someone continues on. What is bravery? Is it putting everything on the line or trusting that it won't get that far? I walk through a field of black-eyed Susans beaten down to their name. I sit and breathe because that is all I can do. I feel their pain as my own and understand why it is that I am here. Although I am alone, I can feel the world change. The light turns orange and fades into darkness. Even though it is dark some places, the light comes up and lets the world see with new eyes. I hum the flowers a lullaby. Sky blues, hopeful greens, promising pinks. When they fold into themselves, I find their shapes. I find their broken hearts like rectangles. They are what they are, but will never be square. Shattered hopes I try to fix. White cannot make the situation lighter. Maybe it makes it worse. That is not my call to make. If you look as close to them as they did to you, that time that seems like a lifetime ago when you broke their stems, you might see what a beautiful disaster you created. When you take that step, putting everything on the line, but trusting deep down that if you are careful, it won't go that far. Maybe they'll grow. Maybe you will grow. But to get there, you have to be brave. Thank you. Enjoy your day.